Right now, someone is pulling your strings, and you don't even know it. Every time you suppress an emotion, because real men don't cry, you're being controlled. Every time you force yourself into the gym, not because you want to, but because you fear being seen as weak, you are being manipulated. Every time you reject vulnerability, intimacy, or authenticity because it doesn't fit the script, you're dancing to someone else's tune. This isn't about self-improvement. This isn't about becoming your best self. This is about a system that profits from your insecurity. A system that sells you an impossible standard, then monetizes your failure to reach it. Welcome to the theater of performative masculinity, where you're both the actor and the audience, trapped in a role you never auditioned for. Machiavelli understood power better than anyone. He knew that the most effective control isn't physical, it's psychological. It's making people police themselves, making them believe the chains are their own choice. Today, we're going to dissect exactly how this works. How performative masculinity has become the ultimate Machiavellian tool. How it manipulates your behavior, your relationships, your entire identity. And most importantly, how to break free. Because once you see the strings, you can cut them. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see yourself and every man around you. The concept of performative masculinity isn't new, but its modern application is devastatingly sophisticated. It's a social technology designed to extract compliance, labor, and money from men while convincing them it's their own idea. Think about it. You're told to be strong, stoic, dominant, but these aren't natural states, they're performances. Exhausting, constant performances that require you to suppress fundamental parts of your humanity. And here's the Machiavellian genius. The system makes you want to perform. It attaches your entire sense of worth to how well you play the role. Your value as a man becomes dependent on maintaining the facade. This creates a perfect control mechanism. You become your own prison guard. Throughout this video, we're going to explore 10 dimensions of this manipulation. Each one will reveal another layer of control you didn't know existed. Before we go deeper, I want you to do something. Drop a comment right now about one masculine rule you followed without questioning why. Just one thing you do or don't do, because that's what men do. This simple act of recognition is your first step toward freedom. Let's begin. The first mechanism of control is what I call the scarcity principle of emotional expression. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Modern masculinity has weaponized this into a doctrine. It's better to feel nothing than to feel wrong. From childhood, boys learn that emotional expression is rationed. Anger is permitted, sometimes even encouraged. But sadness, fear, tenderness, these are contraband. This isn't natural. Neuroscience shows us that male and female brains process emotions similarly. The difference isn't biological, it's trained. And this training serves a purpose. When you cannot express vulnerability, you cannot form deep connections. When you cannot form deep connections, you become isolated. Isolated people are easier to control. They're more dependent on external validation, more susceptible to manipulation, more likely to seek belonging in toxic groups that reinforce the very restrictions that isolated them in the first place. The fitness industry, the self-help gurus, the political movements, they all exploit this manufactured loneliness. They offer belonging, but only if you perform masculinity correctly. Only if you buy the program, adopt the ideology, maintain the image. Consider the language used: emotional discipline, mental toughness, controlling your feelings. These phrases reframe psychological suppression as strength. They make a bug into a feature. But suppression isn't control. Suppression is surrender. You're surrendering your emotional autonomy to a script written by people who profit from your compliance. The Machiavellian move here is brilliant. They've convinced you that freedom is weakness and imprisonment is strength. Every time you swallow your feelings, you think you're being strong. You're actually just being obedient. and the cost is devastating. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They metastasize. They emerge as rage, addiction, depression, physical illness. The male suicide rate isn't an accident. It's a feature of a system that forbids men from accessing the emotional tools that prevent despair. You're being controlled through emotional starvation, and you're calling it discipline. But here's what they don't want you to know. Emotional expression isn't weakness. It's data. It's your internal guidance system telling you what matters, what hurts, what needs to change. When you suppress it, you're flying blind, making decisions based on performance rather than truth. This keeps you predictable, manageable, controllable. The men who break free from this aren't the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who feel everything and choose their response consciously. That's actual strength. That's actual power. And it terrifies the system because it can't be monetized or controlled. But emotional suppression is just the foundation. The second layer of manipulation is the productivity trap, and it's even more insidious. Modern performative masculinity has merged with hustle culture to create a perfect storm of exploitation. You're told your value is your output. Your worth is your productivity. Your identity is your achievement. Rest is weakness. Leisure is laziness. Downtime is failure. This isn't motivation. It's programming. And it serves very specific interests. When your self-worth depends on constant productivity, you become an ideal economic unit. You work longer hours. You sacrifice relationships, health, joy. You consume products that promise to make you more efficient. You're a perpetual motion machine of production and consumption. Machiavelli understood that the best subjects are those who believe their servitude is nobility. The productivity trap does exactly this. It reframes exploitation as excellence. Burnout becomes a badge of honor. Exhaustion becomes proof of commitment. The system has convinced you that your value lies not in who you are, but in what you produce. This is devastating for multiple reasons. First, it makes your worth conditional and external. You're only as good as your last achievement. This creates a treadmill of endless striving, where satisfaction is always just beyond reach. Second, it prevents you from developing the parts of yourself that don't produce measurable output. Relationships, creativity, spirituality, rest, these have no place in the productivity paradigm. They're seen as distractions from the real work of achievement. Third, it makes you vulnerable to collapse. When your entire identity is built on productivity, what happens when you can't produce? Illness, aging, economic shifts, these become existential threats rather than natural parts of life. The influencers selling you morning routines and optimization hacks aren't helping you. They're exploiting your insecurity. They've identified that men have been conditioned to measure themselves by output. So they sell you the promise of more output, better output, optimized output. But the game is rigged. There's always another level. Always another metric. Always another way you're falling short. This keeps you buying, striving, performing. The Machiavellian brilliance is that you think you're pursuing freedom. Financial freedom, time freedom, the freedom that comes from success. But you're actually pursuing a mirage that recedes as you approach. True freedom would be recognizing that your worth isn't tied to your productivity at all. That you have intrinsic value simply by existing. But that realization would break the system. So the system ensures you never reach it. It keeps the carrot always visible, always moving, always just out of reach. And you keep running. Not because you want to, but because you've been convinced that stopping means disappearing. That if you're not producing, you're not valuable. That if you're not grinding, you're not a real man. This is control masquerading as ambition. The third mechanism is the comparison matrix, and it's turbocharged by social media. Performative masculinity requires an audience. You can't perform in isolation. You need witnesses to validate that you're doing it right. Social media has created a global stage where every man is constantly comparing himself to every other man. and losing. Because the comparison is always rigged. You're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You're measuring your reality against their performance and finding yourself lacking. This manufactured inadequacy is intentional. Insecure people are profitable people. They buy solutions to problems they didn't know they had. They chase standards they can never meet. They perform for validation they never receive. The fitness influencer with the perfect physique doesn't show you the steroids, the lighting, the angles, the eating disorder. The entrepreneur with the perfect life doesn't show you the debt, the failed ventures, the manufactured success. The relationship guru with perfect confidence doesn't show you the insecurity, the rejection, a carefully edited persona. You see the performance and assume it's reality. Then you judge yourself for not matching a fiction. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of appearances over reality. Modern masculinity has made this its core principle. What matters isn't who you are, it's who you appear to be. This creates a culture of constant performance anxiety. You're always on stage, always being evaluated, always at risk of being exposed as insufficient. The comparison matrix operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical appearance, financial success, sexual conquest, social status. Every dimension of existence becomes a competitive arena. And in every arena, you're shown men who appear to be winning while you're losing. This isn't accidental. The algorithm knows that engagement comes from emotion, and nothing creates emotion like inadequacy. So you're fed a constant stream of men who have what you don't, who are what you're not, who've achieved what you haven't. And each comparison is a small wound to your self-worth. Death by 1,000 cuts. The solution sold to you is, of course, more performance. Work harder, look better, earn more, achieve bigger. But this just intensifies the trap, because the standards keep rising. The competition keeps increasing. The performance keeps demanding more. You're running faster and faster on a treadmill that's accelerating, and calling it progress. The men who escape this matrix do something radical. They stop comparing. They recognize that every person's journey is unique. That comparison is theft of joy. That their worth isn't determined by ranking. But the system fights this recognition viciously. Because men who don't compare don't consume. They don't need the products, the programs, the promises. They're free. And free men can't be controlled. The fourth layer is sexual performance as identity, and it's perhaps the most psychologically damaging. Performative masculinity has reduced male sexuality to a scorecard. Number of partners, frequency of encounters, duration of performance, size of anatomy. Every aspect quantified, ranked, compared. Your sexual worth becomes your human worth. This is Machiavellian control at its finest. By tying identity to sexual performance, the system creates multiple pressure points. First, it makes intimacy impossible. When sex is performance, it can't be connection. You're too busy monitoring your technique, your stamina, your partner's reaction. You're in your head, not in the moment. You're performing, not experiencing. This prevents the deep bonding that comes from vulnerable, authentic sexuality. And isolated men, as we've established, are controllable men. Second, it creates performance anxiety that becomes self-fulfilling. The pressure to perform causes the very failures you're trying to avoid. Erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, inability to connect. These aren't medical problems, they're symptoms of a sick system. But rather than questioning the system, you question yourself and seek solutions that reinforce the problem. Pills, techniques, strategies, all focused on better performance rather than authentic connection. Third, it reduces women to props in your performance. They're not partners, they're audience members. Their role is to validate your masculinity through their response. This prevents actual relationship and creates a cycle of shallow encounters that leave everyone unsatisfied. The pornography industry has accelerated this devastatingly. It's created a completely fictional standard of sexuality. Bodies that don't exist naturally. Performances that aren't sustainable. Scenarios that aren't realistic. And men compare their real sexuality to this manufactured fantasy. Then feel inadequate. The solution sold is, predictably, more consumption. More porn to learn from. More techniques to master. More performance to achieve. But this just deepens the disconnection from authentic sexuality. You're learning to perform rather than to feel. To impress rather than to connect. To achieve rather than to experience. Machiavelli understood that controlling sexuality is controlling identity. Modern masculinity has weaponized this insight. By making sexual performance the measure of manhood, it's created a vulnerability that can be endlessly exploited. Products, content, validation, all sold to men desperate to prove their worth through their sexuality. The men who break free recognize something revolutionary. That sexuality isn't performance, it's communication. That intimacy isn't achievement, it's vulnerability. That connection isn't conquest, it's mutual exploration. But this recognition threatens a multi-billion-dollar industry. So it's suppressed, mocked, dismissed as weakness. Real men don't need connection, they need conquest. Real men don't seek intimacy, they demonstrate dominance. This is a lie designed to keep you performing, consuming, and suffering. The fifth mechanism is tribal allegiance as thought control, and it's devastatingly effective. Performative masculinity doesn't exist in isolation. It's reinforced through group membership. The gym brothers, the business masterminds, the political movements. Each offers belonging in exchange for conformity. And the conformity required is always the same. Perform masculinity correctly, or be expelled. This is classic Machiavellian strategy. Create in groups and out groups. Make belonging conditional on compliance. Use the threat of exile to enforce behavior. The genius is that the enforcement comes from peers, not authorities. You police yourself and each other. Anyone who questions the performance is attacked not by the system, but by other performers. They're called weak, feminine, beta, soy. The language is designed to trigger shame and enforce compliance. Consider how these groups operate. They have clear hierarchies based on performance metrics. Who's strongest, richest, most successful, most dominant? They have rituals that reinforce the performance. The workouts, the business tactics, the political talking points. They have enemies that justify the performance. The weak men, the feminists, the system. And they have rewards for compliance. Status, validation, belonging. This creates a closed loop where questioning the performance means losing everything. Your friends, your identity, your sense of purpose. So you don't question. You perform harder. You attack those who do question. You become an enforcer of your own prison. The Machiavellian brilliance is that this feels like freedom. You've chosen your tribe. You've found your people. You're part of something bigger. But choice under coercion isn't choice. And belonging that requires constant performance isn't belonging. It's conditional acceptance that can be revoked the moment you fail to perform. This keeps you in a state of perpetual anxiety. You're always one mistake away from exile. Always one moment of weakness away from rejection. So you never relax. Never let your guard down. Never show your full self. You show the performed self that the tribe demands. And call it authenticity. The political dimension of this is particularly insidious. Certain ideologies have recognized that insecure men are recruitable men. They offer simple explanations for complex feelings. You're not struggling because of a system that exploits everyone. You're struggling because of women, immigrants, the weak. This redirects legitimate grievances toward scapegoats and reinforces the very performances that created the struggle. Be harder, stronger, more dominant. Don't feel, don't connect, don't question. The enemy is out there, not in here. This prevents collective recognition of shared exploitation. It keeps men fighting each other rather than examining the system. And it ensures the performance continues. But some men wake up. The sixth layer is the monetization of inadequacy, and it's $1 trillion industry. Every insecurity created by performative masculinity has been turned into a market. Feel weak? Buy supplements? Feel poor? Buy courses. Feel unattractive? Buy grooming products. Feel inadequate? Buy coaching. The system creates the wound and sells you the bandage, and ensures the wound never heals. Because healed men don't consume. Machiavelli wrote that a wise prince creates problems only he can solve. Modern masculinity has industrialized this principle. The fitness industry doesn't want you fit. It wants you perpetually pursuing fitness, buying programs, supplements, equipment, memberships. If you actually achieved your goal and felt satisfied, you'd stop consuming. So the goal posts move. You're never lean enough, big enough, strong enough. There's always another program, another supplement, another level. The business gurus don't want you successful. They want you perpetually pursuing success, buying courses, attending seminars, joining masterminds, hiring coaches. If you actually achieved financial freedom, you'd stop consuming their content. So success is always just one more course away. One more strategy, one more mentor, one more investment. The dating coaches don't want you in fulfilling relationships. They want you perpetually pursuing sexual validation, buying programs, learning techniques, adopting mindsets. If you actually found genuine connection, you'd stop needing their advice. So connection is reframed as weakness. Real men don't settle, they conquer. This keeps you consuming indefinitely. The pattern is identical across industries. Identify an insecurity created by performative masculinity. Offer a solution that provides temporary relief but no actual resolution. Ensure the insecurity remains or intensifies. Sell the next solution. This is Machiavellian economics. The most profitable customer is the perpetually dissatisfied customer, the one who keeps buying but never arrives. And performative masculinity creates millions of these customers. Men who've been convinced their worth is conditional, who measure themselves against impossible standards, who feel perpetually inadequate, and who will pay anything for the promise of finally being enough. The influencers, the gurus, the coaches, they're not successful because they have answers. They're successful because they've mastered the performance. They've figured out how to look like the answer. And desperate men will pay to learn the performance, not realizing that the performance is the problem. The men who escape this trap make a radical move. They stop buying solutions to manufactured problems. They question whether the inadequacy is even real. They recognize that enough is a moving target designed to keep them running, and they step off the treadmill. But this requires something the system has worked hard to destroy. The seventh mechanism is the destruction of male friendship, and it's perhaps the most tragic. Performative masculinity has poisoned the well of male connection. Deep friendship requires vulnerability, sharing fears, doubts, struggles, dreams. But vulnerability violates the performance. So male friendship becomes shallow, surface-level activities without emotional depth. You do things together, but never really know each other. This serves the control system perfectly. Isolated men are dependent on external validation. They have no mirror except the marketplace, no feedback except the performance metrics, no support except what they can buy. Machiavelli understood that divided people are controllable people. Modern masculinity has divided men from each other. You're competitors, not allies. Every other man is a threat to your status. Someone who might outperform you. Someone who makes you look inadequate by comparison. This prevents the collective recognition that would threaten the system. If men actually talk to each other honestly, they'd discover something revolutionary. Everyone is struggling. Everyone feels inadequate. Everyone is exhausted by the performance. The perfect masculinity you're chasing doesn't exist. It's a shared fiction maintained by mutual silence. But that silence is enforced viciously. Men who try to go deep are mocked. Emotional conversations are dismissed as therapy sessions. Vulnerability is attacked as weakness. The message is clear: perform or be expelled. This creates a devastating loneliness. You're surrounded by other men, but completely alone. You have drinking buddies, but no one who knows you. You have gym partners, but no one you can cry with. You have business associates, but no one you can fail in front of. The suicide statistics among men aren't surprising when you understand this. Men are dying of loneliness while surrounded by other men, all of them performing strength while drowning in isolation. The solution isn't more male spaces. It's different male spaces. Spaces where vulnerability is strength, where honesty is valued over performance, where connection matters more than status. But these spaces are rare and often mocked because they threaten the system. Men who support each other don't need to buy support. Men who validate each other don't need external validation. Men who know they're not alone don't stay on the treadmill. So male friendship must remain shallow. Activity-based rather than emotion-based. Doing rather than being. Performing rather than connecting. This keeps you isolated, insecure, and controllable. But it doesn't have to be this way. The eighth layer is aggression as conflict resolution, and it's destroying lives. Performative masculinity allows only one negative emotion: anger. Sadness becomes anger. Fear becomes anger. Hurt becomes anger. Disappointment becomes anger. This emotional compression is catastrophic. It eliminates nuance from your internal experience. Everything becomes a nail because anger is your only hammer, and it makes you dangerous to yourself and others. Machiavelli wrote about the utility of controlled violence. Modern masculinity has made violence the default response to discomfort. Not just physical violence, though that's certainly part of it, but verbal aggression, emotional intimidation, dominance displays. Any challenge to your performance is met with aggression. Someone questions you? Aggression. Someone outperforms you? Aggression. Someone makes you feel inadequate? Aggression. This serves multiple control functions. First, it prevents self-reflection. If every uncomfortable feeling becomes anger directed outward, you never look inward. You never question why you feel threatened. You never examine the performance you're defending. Second, it isolates you further. Aggressive people don't have deep relationships. They have people who tolerate them or fear them. Neither creates genuine connection. Third, it makes you predictable and manageable. Angry men are easy to manipulate. Point them at a target, and they attack. Political movements, marketing campaigns, social media algorithms all exploit this. They trigger your anger and direct it where they want it. You think you're being strong. You're being used. The compression of all emotions into anger also prevents healing. You can't process grief through anger. You can't resolve fear through anger. You can't heal hurt through anger. You just create more damage that requires more suppression, that creates more pressure, that explodes as more anger. It's a cycle that intensifies until something breaks, often violently. The statistics on male violence aren't about biology. They're about a system that channels all male distress into a single destructive outlet, then acts surprised when men destroy. The men who break this cycle learn emotional granularity. They learn to identify what they're actually feeling beneath the anger: hurt, fear, shame, disappointment, grief. And they learn to address those feelings appropriately. This doesn't make them weak. It makes them precise. Anger becomes one tool among many, not the only tool. But learning this requires unlearning everything performative masculinity taught you. It requires recognizing that emotional range is strength, not weakness. The ninth mechanism is the sacrifice narrative, and it's perhaps the most insidious. Performative masculinity glorifies male suffering. The grind, the hustle, the sacrifice. You're supposed to destroy yourself for success. Neglect your health for wealth. Abandon your relationships for achievement. Suppress your needs for productivity. This isn't nobility. It's exploitation. But it's framed as heroic. The man who works himself to death is admired. The man who sacrifices everything for his family is celebrated. The man who never rests is respected. Machiavelli understood that people will accept tyranny if you convince them it's virtue. The sacrifice narrative does exactly this. It reframes self-destruction as self-improvement, burnout as dedication, imbalance as focus, and it serves very specific interests. Employers benefit from men who work themselves to death. Industries benefit from men who consume endlessly to cope with stress. Systems benefit from men too exhausted to question or resist. The sacrifice is real, but it's not noble. You're not sacrificing for your family. You're sacrificing your family. The time you don't spend with them. The presence you don't offer. The emotional availability you don't have. You're not building a legacy. You're building a monument to absence. And when you're gone, either through death or divorce or breakdown, the monument remains. But you don't. The narrative tells you this is what men do. Men sacrifice. Men endure. Men suffer silently. But this isn't what men do. It's what men are told to do. By systems that benefit from their suffering. The alternative isn't laziness or irresponsibility. It's balance, boundaries, sustainability. It's recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup. That self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. That rest isn't weakness, it's wisdom. But these truths threaten the exploitation. So they're dismissed as soft, weak, feminine. Real men don't need balance, they need discipline. Real men don't need rest, they need resilience. This keeps you grinding until you break. And when you break, you're replaced. The system doesn't care about your sacrifice. It just needs your labor, your consumption, your compliance. The men who reject this narrative do something revolutionary. They prioritize their humanity over their productivity. They recognize that they matter, not just what they produce. They build lives worth living, not just resumes worth reading. But this requires rejecting everything performative masculinity promises. The 10th and final layer is the illusion of control. And it's the master key. Performative masculinity promises that if you just perform well enough, you'll be in control of your life, your success, your relationships, your destiny. This is a lie. The performance doesn't give you control. It takes it away. Every aspect of performative masculinity is about external validation. You're constantly checking, am I strong enough, successful enough, dominant enough? But the metrics are external. The judges are external. The standards are external. You've surrendered your internal compass for an external scorecard. And external scorecards can always be manipulated. Machiavelli's ultimate insight was that perceived power matters more than actual power. Modern masculinity has inverted this against you. You're given the perception of control while being systematically stripped of actual autonomy. You think you're choosing the grind, but the grind chose you. You think you're choosing the performance, but the performance is mandatory. You think you're choosing your values, but they were installed by a system that profits from them. Real control would be the ability to opt out, to choose rest without shame, to choose vulnerability without ridicule, to choose authenticity without punishment. But performative masculinity doesn't allow these choices. It punishes deviation and rewards compliance, then calls compliance freedom. The men who reclaim actual control do something terrifying. They stop performing. They stop seeking external validation. They stop measuring themselves by metrics designed to keep them inadequate. They develop internal standards based on their actual values. They build lives that serve their well-being, not their image. They choose authenticity over performance, even when it costs them status. This is actual power. The power to define yourself, rather than be defined. The power to choose your values rather than inherit them. The power to live according to your truth rather than someone else's script. But this power threatens everything we've discussed. It threatens the industries that monetize your insecurity. It threatens the systems that exploit your labor. It threatens the ideologies that require your compliance. So it must be destroyed before it spreads. Men who found this freedom are attacked, mocked, dismissed. They're called weak, deluded failures. The message to other men is clear. This is what happens when you stop performing. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Those men are free, and you can be too. What's your next move? If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable.